Today's submitted transcript scrutinizes a media figure's controversial trip to Russia, alleging state propaganda and personal hypocrisy, right before doing this really jarring pivot into a sponsor read.
Right, and we're just going to skip the pleasantries today because, well, the raw material here is super passionate and rich, but we need to tighten up the rhetorical structure to really maximize its effectiveness.
Categorizing the different levels of hypocrisy creates a much more devastating and organized argument than listing them randomly.
Yeah, because right now, the primary weakness of this draft is it's basically a scattergun approach to outrage. The text just bounces erratically between these really complex geopolitical concepts and like superficial internet drama.
Oh, it really does.
I mean, in one paragraph, the author invokes Alexander Dugin, who is, this far-right political philosopher and architect of modern Russian imperialism. And then literally in the very next sentence, they snap to critiquing the subject for wearing a $4,000 Balenciaga suit.
Right, and then just a few lines later, we're suddenly looking at data on Christian persecution from Grok. It's a lot. Think about the cognitive load that places on a listener.
Oh, it's huge.
When you demand the audience process the ideological implications of an imperialist philosopher and then immediately ask them to care about a luxury clothing brand, you trigger this massive cognitive switching penalty.
Right. The brain literally has to discard the schema of international relations and then, load up the schema of pop culture.
Exactly. And doing that rapidly just exhausts the audience. They lose the thread of the actual argument because they don't know what weight to assign to each piece of evidence.
The listener is just left wondering, wait, is the core issue global human rights or is it fashion hypocrisy?
Yeah, it severely dilutes the overall impact. It sounds more like a stream of consciousness rant than a targeted argument.
So the suggestion here is to deliberately group these critiques into an escalating ladder of hypocrisy. You have to guide the listener sequentially, from the most accessible, superficial contradictions right up to the profound, unforgivable ideological hypocrisies.
It's basically like setting a psychological trap. If you try to drop the heaviest, most complex geopolitical arguments right at the start, the audience might just deflect.
Yeah, totally.
But if you bait the path with something universally relatable and highly visual, like a hypocritical wardrobe choice, you lock in their attention before bringing down that heavier ideological hammer.
Right, so let's map out how the author can restructure this, step by step. You start at the base, the personal level.
Okay, so lead with the fashion stuff.
Exact. The author should use the Balenciaga suit as the initial hook. Point out the stark irony of wearing a $4,000 garment from a brand she previously condemned for supporting child exploitation. It's visual, and it instantly proves a lack of core principles.
Yeah, that's super digestible.
And then you step up to the lifestyle level. This is where you bring in the bizarre, manufactured environment of the trip itself, like that laughable excuse that her husband is merely there for the fishing.
Oh man, the fishing excuse is so absurd.
Right? You juxtapose that against the highly curated, state-sponsored luxury they're broadcasting. You establish that the entire scenario is just completely artificial.
Which naturally builds the momentum you need to introduce the heaviest material without overwhelming the listener. It's like a prosecutor presenting evidence in a major trial. If you jump from the murder weapon to a parking ticket and back to the motive, the jury just gets dizzy.
That is such a good analogy. You have to build the case sequentially, because once you've established that her clothes are hypocritical and her environment is artificial, then you deliver the ideological climax.
The Russian cathedral detail.
Yes, the author has a phenomenal piece of evidence buried in this draft. This media figure is praising Russia's Christian heritage while literally standing in a cathedral built by atheistic Soviet communists, complete with hammer and sickle stained glass.
It's wild.
By placing this at the top of the escalating structure, you draw a devastating contrast. You highlight the ultimate ideological hypocrisy of ignoring actual Christian persecution in places like Nigeria just to push a pro-authoritarian narrative. When you order it sequentially, the argument becomes inescapable.
Grounding speculative claims about financial compensation in established historical precedents strengthens the credibility of the accusations.
Because, well, right now, the author attempts to tackle the financial motivations behind the trip, but they present this massive accusation entirely as a subjective feeling.
Think this is organic, or you follow the money.
Right, I feel like there's actual stuff happening here behind the scene. It leaves the whole thing vulnerable.
Commentators rely on "I feel like" as a rhetorical defense mechanism all the time. It's an instinctive way to avoid making a definitive claim that could get you sued when you don't actually have a subject's bank statements.
Sure, legally it makes sense, but rhetorically, it gives the target's defenders an immediate, effortless dismissal.
Oh, absolutely. They can just frame the entire critique as mere jealousy or some partisan conspiracy theory or just petty internet drama. If you want the audience to trust your authority, telegraphing a mere hunch actively undermines you.
Exact. So the suggestion is that the author needs to replace that vulnerability with historical proof. Take this passing reference that's already in the text and weaponize.
You mean the Qatar reference?
Yes, the draft briefly mentions previous conservative influencer trips to Qatar, but right now it's just a throwaway comparison. The author must upgrade that into a foundational evidentiary framework to prove this is standard operating procedure for authoritarian regimes.
Okay, but let's drill into the mechanics of that. If the author cannot legally claim this person was wired money by the Kremlin, how do they use the Qatar example to make the financial accusations stick without crossing into baseless conspiracy?
By pointing to the established paper trail of similar operation, the author should utilize the Justice Department's FARA filings.
The Foreign Agents Registration Act?
Right. It is the literal, legally required documentation of who foreign governments are paying to influence American audiences. The author can rewrite this section to explicitly parallel the hard evidence from Qatar to the situation in Russia.
So what does that actually sound like in the script?
You'd frame it by saying something like, "We know exactly how this authoritarian PR machine operates because the Justice Department FARA filings revealed the legal firm was paid $180,000 a month to facilitate those exact types of media appearances in Qatar."
Wow.
So when we see Russian state television posting curated slideshows of this media figure, amplified by state propagandists, we aren't guessing. We are observing the exact same documented state-sponsored playbook.
Okay, but let's test that strategy. I want to push back for a second.
Sure.
Is there a risk that by focusing so heavily on the financial mechanism, like the idea that this is just a paid PR gig, the author accidentally minimizes the unique ideological danger of the Russia trip?
What do you mean?
Well, the draft includes a quote from Buckley Carlson about embracing Russia to explicitly reject the global homo agenda. That indicates an ideological alignment that is far deeper and more anti-Western than just getting a free hotel stay. If we frame it purely as a grift, do we give the subject a pass on the actual ideology?
Oh, that is a critical distinction. Yeah, if it's just a grift, it implies the subject doesn't actually believe the propaganda, which makes them seem less dangerous.
Exactly.
To solve this, the author has to synthesize both elements. The concrete execution here requires weaving the FARA precedent with those ideological quotes. You use the Qatar filings to prove the mechanism of the compensation, but you use the Buckley Carlson quote to establish the motive.
Right. So you'd say, this isn't merely a transactional vacation like the Qatar trips. This is a fully funded operation with a uniquely anti-American ideological objective.
Yes. That synthesis completely eliminates the defense that it's just an innocent vacation, while also highlighting the genuine geopolitical threat.
Executing a thematic pivot into a sponsor read prevents the abrupt tonal whiplash that currently undermines the preceding heavy political commentary.
Because the transition at the end of this draft is frankly, arguably, the most destructive flaw in the entire piece.
It really is.
The author builds this intense, heavy case about someone acting as a useful idiot for a hostile regime. The audience's cortisol levels are up, they are engaged in serious geopolitical stakes. And then, literally in the next sentence, without a single beat of hesitation, the author pivots to, "Don't be ridiculous. Why would you screw up your dog's vitamins?"
It's so jarring. Reading this transition feels like slamming on the brakes on the highway to look at a billboard. It fundamentally breaks the parasocial trust between the commentator and the audience.
Oh, completely.
When a speaker pivots from the persecution of Christians to selling dog supplements with zero friction, the subconscious signal sent to the listener is that the preceding outrage was entirely manufactured.
Right. The audience just feels manipulated.
Exactly. They realized the geopolitical anger was just a performance designed to hold their attention long enough to sell them a product. We need to figure out a way to keep the car moving at the exact same speed while seamlessly integrating the billboard into the scenery.
Because otherwise, it makes the entire commentary feel cheap and transactional. To fix this, the author must build a deliberate rhetorical bridge.
Right.
The suggestion is to identify the core thematic momentum of the political segment and use that to power the advertising. The underlying theme of the Russia critique is authenticity versus artificiality.
Curated state propaganda versus actual reality.
Exactly. The author needs to connect that specific theme directly to the value proposition of the dog supplement.
It's like a club DJ mixing two entirely different tracks, right? A skilled DJ doesn't just cut the power on a heavy bass track and instantly hit play on a pop vocal.
Right. They beat match.
Yeah, they find the tempo of the outgoing song, match it to the incoming song, and create a window where both tracks blend together. The audience keeps dancing because the momentum never stops. So, how does the author beat match a geopolitical rant with a dog vitamin?
By contrasting the subject's artificial behavior directly with the product's core value. For instance, the script could transition by saying, while some influencers are busy selling out their credibility for fake luxury and authoritarian propaganda, we prefer to focus on things that are actually authentic and improve your daily life, like keeping your dogs healthy from the inside out with rough green.
I love that. But does it have to be a direct contrast of values, or can the author leverage some of the specific imagery developed earlier in the critique, like to make the bridge feel even more integrated?
Oh, repurposing specific imagery is an even more advanced technique. So, earlier in the draft, the author mocks the Russian state TV clips for portraying this fake, curated supermodel lifestyle.
Right.
The author can playfully grab that exact vocabulary to beat match the transition. The script could read, "They are over there faking a supermodel lifestyle for state television, but if you want to see what a real, authentic supermodel looks like, you should see the coat on my dog Lindy since we started her on these probiotics."
That is brilliant. That preserves the ethos of the speaker entirely. It signals to the listener that the commentator is still in the exact same analytical, slightly sarcastic mindset, just applying that lens to a product they endorse.
Right. It completely neutralizes the transactionality because the advertisement feels like a logical extension of the conversation they were just invested in. It's the defining difference between an amateur YouTube rant and a highly professional broadcast.
The audience doesn't feel bait and switched. They feel guided.
Exactly.
Okay, so to briefly synthesize the mechanics we've explored today, the author must execute 3 structural overhauls. First, eliminate the cognitive switching penalty. Organize the disparate attacks into an escalating ladder of hypocrisy, moving from the superficial irony to the curated lifestyle up to the profound ideological contradiction.
Right. And second, strip away the subjective vulnerability. Anchor those speculative claims of financial compensation using the hard, historical FARA filings of the Qatar trips to establish a documented mechanism.
While maintaining the ideological motive, of course.
Yes. And third, maintain parasocial trust. Build thematic bridges to smooth out those jarring ad transitions, utilizing the momentum of the core themes to naturally introduce the sponsor.
So, for the listener submitting this, your immediate actionable steps are to open your document and physically reorder your paragraphs to fit that escalating ladder.
Then use the search function to locate every instance where you wrote, "I feel like," or "I think," and replace those with the concrete FARA precedent.
And finally, draft a customized transitional sentence that explicitly connects the concept of artificial propaganda to the authenticity of your sponsor's product. We invite the listener to apply these structural and pacing edits to their script and submit their revised work back to the critique for further exploration.
Because a truly effective commentary doesn't just rely on raw passion. It relies on a deliberate, calculated sequence of delivery.